And there we go. And we are recording. So, hello, Mel. How are you?
Great, how are you?
I am really good as my longstanding returning guest, whom I just adore, and our mentor that we always go to for all things nutrition. Today is a little bit different in that sense because we're going to get to know a little bit about you this time and not just the nutritional aspect, but we will talk about your business, of course.
Thank you so much for having me back.
So I'm excited. So thank you for coming. Thank you for doing this again.
My pleasure.
And so for this topic series, we are getting into breaking boundaries and following your gut and following your intuition. So I know some backstory, but I think the audience will be pleasantly, interestingly interested in terms of how things came to be, because nutrition was not something that you were always, it was not the first choice in terms of your path, in terms of pathway. So can you break down a little bit prior to Melcannourish, what was your day-to-day looking like prior to all of this?
Yes, absolutely. So prior to becoming a nutritionist, I was working for the sports network, so TSN, owned by
Mhm.
Bell Media. And I did that for 16 years. So basically my it was hectic life, a fabulous job, really exciting, working with athletes, shooting commercials, traveling, running contests across the country. I mean,
It's amazing.
yeah, right? Like for most
Yeah.
people, that was the job, right? So I did that for 16 years, and then I had my daughter, went on a 15-month mat leave, and then I came back, and then I had my son. I went on for another 15-month mat leave, and then it was after that that everything changed.
So definitely a change for sure, like from then to now, right? The hustle and bustle of what that was. And you're absolutely right in the sense, like the sound of that and the description of that is, I think, what most people dream of. It's the travel, it's the social. Again, we're talking prior to COVID, of course, and all things that change with that. But it's that hustle and bustle, working in sports, commercials, media. That's the dream. That's the dream job. And working for someone or some place like TSN, sure, it paid fairly well in terms of other perks and benefits. So, what was the trigger? So, what happened that made you realize, something's not right, and sort of the thought process of beginning a switch or thoughts of change? What triggered it?
Great question. So there was massive events that happened. So I returned back to the career after my son, 15 months of being on mat leave. And that was, I think, November 1st,
Right.
of 2017. And I mean, I jumped right into the hustle. Like within 2 weeks that I was back, I was already, shooting a McCain's fries commercial.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and it was a big deal, and it was lots of fun. I just wasn't feeling myself, though. I mean, and for me at the time, it was I'm tired. I have two young children at home. I'm going back to working these hours, and hours meant not just your 9 to 5. Like I
Yeah.
would start in the morning by 7 just to get on top of things. Yes, I would have to leave by. I think I was leaving maybe by 4:30, a little earlier, and then I'd go home, do the mom thing, and then I'd be back online. So it was a lot because I had direct reports under me as well, right? So it was responsibility, but it was great and it was fun. But I wasn't eating, so I would wake up in the morning. I would throw up every morning, and I thought that was normal. I thought
Sorry,
this is
sorry. You were throwing up in the morning?
yeah, this was nerves, I thought, right? This was nerves, right? But I was throwing up bile because I wasn't eating. I was eating one banana a day and some of those, premium crackers, the nice salty square premium crackers. I was having maybe half a sleeve every day. And just to put something in my system, I go through my day with anxiety. And I thought this was normal. I hid it from everyone. Everyone was like, thanks, it's great to have you back. And I said, yeah. And 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks became 10 weeks. So now imagine in 10 weeks, you don't eat, you start to show it. So I was getting a lot of the compliments, right? Oh my God, you look fantastic. You lost all your baby weight, as they called it. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But within myself, I was dying. I was dying. Um, And it got to the point where we were now approaching the holidays. And I was seeing a counselor at the time, and then I had to see my doctor. And he said, what you're going through is delayed postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started going back to work, I started weaning. I was nursing my boy, and I was weaning because I'm like, I can only feed him in the morning and at night.
Right.
So I did it properly, like I did it slowly. But I think that coupled with the pressure of going back to that sort of lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? And everything that comes with that, it was just a snowball. And then not eating. So there's from a nutritional perspective, the moment your brain stops, receiving the glucose it needs to get, over 10 weeks, that's a long, long time to be in starvation. My doctor said, like, you cannot go back to work right now. You need to take a break. You need to start eating. You need to start walk. I almost couldn't even walk. Um, you just need to do a lot of things. And so I did. I took a mental leave, which was really tough, right? Because obviously I knew people would know that I was taking a mental leave. And at the time, I was a different person then, right? I was just like, very, everything was, quiet and secretive. And I didn't want people to know, because you're thinking, when I go back, are they going to judge me? Am I going to not get those opportunities because I know I had to go on a mental leave?
Right.
Obviously, eating the stigma that now I am completely against. I'm very open about mental health, mental illness, my personal anxiety, and my experiences. But at the time, that was challenging. So I took the time off. I took 6 months off, and it was in that time frame that I made different decisions.
Well, and I think, that's just, it's so huge. It's so huge for a variety of reasons. And one thing that sort of stands out is it's what we attribute to normal, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm just tired.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, well, and then the compliments you were saying that you were getting because you were obviously losing weight, but people not knowing why. But it's so easy sometimes to hide,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people just don't always get it. And so that's why I think sometimes it's so interesting, and we should be mindful of how we approach certain things,
Mm-hmm.
with things like that, because I've been in that situation before in my life where I lost a lot of weight, and was so happy about it, but there were other things going on that people didn't realize. And it was so easy to hide, I guess, is my biggest thing in terms of that. So my next question is in regards to intuition.
Mm-hmm.
So going from the corporate world to an independent, more mindful, holistic lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
There's the 6 months that you took off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would imagine in those 6 months, you had great days and some really, really low days. I can only imagine and connect with.
Mm-hmm.
So what does intuition look like, feel like for you? And I've asked this question with every guest, because it looks different for everybody. But my hope is the more people hear the different ways that intuition looks and feels, hopefully they will connect patterns or similarities, because we all too often silence our guts. And we do so as we lean towards security and stability and do what makes sense, but not necessarily what drives us, what aligns with us, what's healthiest for us. But we hear it, we know it, but usually we ignore it. So
Mm-hmm.
what does intuition, so especially during that whole process that you were going through, you must have felt or known something. What did it feel like, look like for you?
So I'd say a good 5 years prior to the main event,
Mm-hmm.
there were moments where I was stopping, already questioning, like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is there
Okay.
something else I want to do? And the answer that came through was, I do want to do something with more purpose, but what does that mean? I need an income. It's very difficult to change when you're doing financially well. It's very difficult to walk away from that, right?
Right.
So I kind of like, I would dip into those moments and those thoughts, and then I would kind of dip out, and I would just continue. So that was 5 years prior. So for me, I found that my intuition actually came through feelings within different energy centers in my body. So I'm a Reiki practitioner as well, as you know. And so I've always found that in my root chakra, which is like lower back area. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
When change has been required, I get messages in that area. In my solar plexus, which is like right here above, in between your ribs, like right there.
Okay.
So I feel it there, and then I feel it in my throat chakra, which is right here in my throat. So I got those experiences, right? But I mean, back then I wasn't into Reiki and all that, so I didn't really understand what all
Right.
that. But I knew that my body was trying to tell me something. And the funniest thing was, and I thought this was really interesting. So I have a spiritual healer that I would go to once in a while. So at that time when I was on a mental leave, I thought perfect time to go. So when I went to her, and I said to her, I said, I throw up every morning. It's really bile because I'm not eating. Um, and I said, I've got delayed postpartum. And she said, yes, the doctors will diagnose you always with, a diagnosis. She's like, but really what you're going through? She goes, you're shedding your skin. And I'm like, hmm? She's like, you're a snake. You're like a snake. She goes, right now you are shedding. There is something that is not sitting well with you, and you are trying to get rid of it. And I was like, okay. And she's like, is there anything not? I said, well, I don't know. I said, I mean, it's been years that I've been questioning whether this is the path I want to be on. I said, and now this has all happened. I'm like, she goes, you're being pushed into making a decision.
Right.
And I said, wow. That was like, like just mind blowing. So from then on, right? And the one thing that I'd say was a clear indicator in writing on the wall was, I'd say, I want to say 1 or 2 years prior to this event, to me
Okay.
taking the leave, I was thinking at that point about nutrition, becoming a nutritionist. And I don't know why. I actually reached out to the school and I said, can you send me a brochure? And just so I can, and I never received anything. Never received anything. And then 2 years went on, and I did not for a moment ever, my mind never went back to that nutrition. So when I was on my leave, and my spiritual healer and my husband as well said, where do you envision what would you want to do if you could?
Mm-hmm.
If money wasn't a factor, what would you want to do? And I said, and it clicked, and I was just like, I've always wanted to be a nutritionist. I said, but obviously that's me beginning a business and leaving security.
Yeah.
Do you know, Steph, that night I was on my computer and I stumbled upon an inbox in my computer. I think it was iCloud that I never ever went into. I went into my regular ones, but I didn't even know it existed. And in there was the brochure from 2 years prior for the nutrition. I'm like, that's where I went. They actually did send me a brochure. And then I
And you
started.
found it that night.
Yeah. So that's what intuition
Mm-hmm.
feels like to me.
I said this before too, how and more and more in my life as I'm getting older, life never happens to you, it happens for you. Even though at the time and in many darker moments in our lives, it does not feel that way. And I can understand and relate to that. But it does not feel that way at the time, but that things happen for you and not to you. And that the universe has interesting ways of communicating. It's a matter of being open to it.
Yeah.
And the vision, and I mean, like I have like vision boards around, and like I have certain things that sort of try and strategies that try and like help me stay focused and things like that. But I said this in another interview as well. I heard somewhere that in your moments of like, not when you kind of like that, not psychosis, that's not the right word. My goodness. Sorry, people, not psychosis, but like when you're kind of in that alpha state where like you're watching TV and you kind of like, or hypnotic state where you kind of daydream or you kind of so relax that you're kind of like not numb, kind of tune out for a minute, but you're absolutely there, but your brain kind of goes into almost like an autopilot kind of thing. In it, you sort of daydream or you have visions of like, oh, my life in 5 years, where I want to be. Or like I said this before, I was in my kitchen once and I was like cutting up for dinner. And I had a vision of like what my dream kitchen would look like. and like what I'd be doing and where I'd be going that night. I had this whole like daydream. Allow your mind to kind of go into that kind of alpha like or delta state. I'm not saying it properly, but
I get
um,
exactly what you're saying, though. I
but
totally get
it's that kind of autopilot mode, and you allow yourself to kind of drift where you will. It's actually the universe showing you glimpses and communicating with you of what is possible
it. Hmm.
and um, what can happen for you if you allow yourself to take it as a message of such.
Hmm.
And that always stuck with me in such a way because I can sometimes daydream very vividly. And my intuition has always looked, I get this weird, and I'm not as familiar with my chakras, although I'm becoming more familiar, but it's right in my tummy. I get this weird fluttery feeling,
Hmm.
and it's quick, and it's like, oh, I felt that. And it's always the back of my neck.
So
Like the hair,
that would be your solar plexus, and then
that's
that
where I
would
feel
be
it.
your throat chakra. Yeah, your throat chakra
To
as
me, it's the
well.
back of my neck where it's
Yeah.
like the hairs kind of go up. I'm like, oh, and
Yes.
like, and it's quick, and it's like
Yes.
if I'm having an idea or I'm talking to someone or they say something, and I'm like, oh, and I get this weird like pang, like, or call it a ping to another work I'm doing, but um, that's where kind of mine comes from in
Hmm.
terms of what it looks like and feels like, and I'm trying to trust it more instead of like bypassing it or ignoring it real quick. I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, and then just keep going. I'm trying as hard as I can to be more, I guess, aware of those dreams or daydreams or visions that I have, and be like, oh, why does that look like that? What does
Hmm.
that mean? What could that mean? And
Hmm.
then same with those feelings in terms of how my body is kind of communicating with the situations at hand. So that's just kind of interesting how it shows up for different people in
In
that.
different ways. Absolutely.
Now, one thing I would love to touch on, because I do know how open you are with mental health and how much I very much admire that deeply, and more people should be. What were some strategies, like how in that 6 months, right?
Hmm.
How were you able to navigate some of those mental health darker days? Because I
Hmm.
think it's important that people at least know what's available, what it may look like, what you can access, and how it shows up differently for people. And how, of course, you were able to get there on the other side, of course. But
Hmm.
at the time, it may not have felt that way. So, in terms of your mental health during that time, if you'd be willing to share some strategies of things that you were able to do to get through it.
For sure. So it was right after the new year. So it's January. So let's
Okay.
think about that, right? So mental illness is tough any month.
Yeah.
But bring it to January, cold. I mean, we're in Canada, crisp snow everywhere, but lots of sun, right? There was lots of sun.
Yeah.
January usually brings a lot of sun. Um, so off the bat, I actually spent my first month worrying about my job and worrying about the individuals who had to pick up the slack, but also what people were saying, what would they say, and what my return would be like.
Right.
And in hindsight, what a waste of time. Okay, that month could have been utilized in so many more effective ways, but I had to figure out how to get out of that slump. But once I did, my days where I had a therapist that I would see twice or three
Okay.
times a week, which was a
Right.
lot, right? Because usually I see my therapist like, it depends. It depends. Sometimes it's once in a while, and sometimes it's once a week or once every 2 weeks. This was 2 to 3 times a week, so it was a lot, but it was
Okay.
necessary. Um, I took walks outside in nature, so it was freezing, and I had no desire to do it, but I would go out bundled up, and I'd go walk in the sun, right?
Okay.
um, Getting like just absolutely frozen in the face was actually therapeutic for me. It actually felt good as I thought. When it came back in emotionally, it actually felt good. I would take naps in the sun. So on my couch is situated in the front window. I would
Okay.
lay down so that the sun would beat on me for however the length of time it was. And it felt so, so good. I went on medication, which was a tough decision for me because I wasn't a holistic nutritionist at that time. But now that I am, I always try to figure it out in every other way before I go to medication. But by no means, I mean, I've been on medication for anxiety and depression twice in my life. and I
Yep.
recognize when it's needed and the importance of it, and also the sheer fact that you can get off of it, with the help of your doctor as well when you're ready, right?
Yep.
So I'm not the individual who says no, do everything naturally. When it comes to mental health, sometimes you need the medication
Great.
to help you out. So for me, I definitely needed the medication because I needed to start eating. I needed to start nourishing my body. So my husband actually started making me smoothies every morning that were packed with nutrients, like just like vegetables, some fruits, cinnamon, um, nut milks, and all that good stuff. Just because I couldn't eat, so the idea was maybe you can drink, which I
Right.
could, but at first I was throwing that up. So I had to literally take sips every half hour. Okay, so it was like every half hour. So I would be drinking the smoothie for most of the day, basically, right? But I did what I had to do to get my stomach back to keeping the food down and not letting the food come out.
Right.
I journaled. So I was never one to journal, ever one to journal. And someone had said, "Why don't you try journaling?" And I was like, okay. And I actually journaled every single day, and I still have that journal. And I go back into it once in a while, but I have to be in the right mindset because it was a very dark time, right? So I took
Absolutely.
it, right? Like even
Yeah.
now, to go back into that, I have to be in a good state of mind. Um, I did yoga. I meditated. I did lots of meditation.
Yep.
So I was doing a lot. Those 6 months were probably the best 6 months of my life. I mean, minus the first month where I was trying to figure it out. Did so much for myself, so much self care because the kids were being taken care of. My husband was working, and it was me alone at home. And I knew, like, okay, I can do all this good stuff. And it really, really made a difference. Really made a difference.
I think journaling for me was, and a couple of things you mentioned that I can sort of echo. So journaling for me, I I got back into after my daughter, and I was going through some postpartum some as well. And looking back, and like you said, I have read those little booklets since. I have to be in the right state because they're dark.
Hmm.
But it was also great. It was great at the time to get it out, yes, but it's also great to look back and reflect on it because it was so dark that
Hmm.
I read it and I'm like, oh my God. Like in such a good way, a reflective way. It reminds me of what to avoid so that I know that I don't allow that to happen in the all ways that I can, that I don't allow myself to get back there.
Hmm.
And that was also part of my healing as well, where I would go back and I would read it and I'd be like, I am so sick of my own shit. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so sick of it. Like, I'm reading it. I'm like, oh my God, woman. Like,
Hmm.
relax. Like, I mean, some parts I can look back and be like, wasn't that bad? Or maybe like, try it this way. Like, looking back as almost like a different person,
Sure.
and I'm able to like now say, I got to a point, and I was talking to my healer about this too. I'm like, I think I'm just sick of being upset. Like, I'm sick of this shit. Like, I'm just sick of it.
Hmm.
And they're like, good.
Yeah.
Like, but it took that. Like, it really did take me actually doing it. And even meditation. I
Mhm.
was never one to meditate. I'm like, there's no way I can possibly do this. I cannot devote an hour of my time, or there's just not going to happen. And then it was my healer that said, why don't you try 5 minutes?
Mhm.
Like, something tells me between brushing your teeth and like putting your shirt on, like, I think you should take 5 minutes in the bathroom and give it a shot.
And
It
it's a
doesn't
skill. Meditation's a skill. Is you just don't fall into it.
and that was it. It's like, just work at it like a little bit at a time, like a little bit. Doesn't have to be like this big elaborate room, candle. Like, I mean, ideally it would be great. But
Mhm.
like, if you can't, take the 5 minutes where you can take the 5 minutes. And that's actually what it took. It took
Yeah,
a little bit at a time and kind of built up that way.
for
So
sure.
now, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So now, fast forward for me into the birth of Melcannourish. So then, out of sort of the rain comes the rainbow. So it was Melcannourish was birthed from that process. So explain for everybody how that happened.
So when I returned back to work, to my corporate life,
Right.
um, at that point, it was 6 months in, I knew at that point that, like, I'm doing this. I'm resigning.
Hmm.
This is happening. And I did that. And I'd say that my last day was August 1st. And then I started September 1st, full time schooling. And it was a 1 year program. And it was very, very intense. But I did it within the 1 year. And then from that moment on, you just the website, the first thing you need to get together, your website,
Right.
your business cards, and all that good stuff. Fast forward to today, I help clients one on one.
Mhm.
I'm, helping, some clients come to do really in-depth analysis, while others just want meal plans and to help them in that sense, and to educate them, to teach them how to read labels, how to go shopping, how to
Right.
buy the right foods, how to, cook them properly, how to help their family, how to do things in the most efficient way. Because my whole thing's always been like healthify your hustle. So I came from a very hustling lifestyle, and it's still that lifestyle. Don't think that when you leave a hustling corporate world and you start your own business that it's going to be any easier. It's not. It's actually more more intense. But when you're doing something you love and you're passionate about, it doesn't even feel like work, right?
Right.
So helping clients in that way. And I'm also now like a Reiki practitioner. So,
Right.
holistically, so I'm a holistic nutritionist. So I holistically, through body, mind, and spirit, am helping the individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you just got a beautiful new studio. Like I just look at sort of the path that's sort of led, like when you look at a few years back in your corporate life. And recently, I don't know when I saw this on your social media, but that got me, was a picture of you many years ago.
Mhm.
It was your corporate lifestyle. Like it was many, many years ago. I don't know if it was prior to your kids or not, or your kids were very little. I'm
Was
not
that
sure.
was that where I was like two different pictures?
The two different pictures of like then and now. And I
Last
was
day. That was my last day of work.
oh
My
my
last day,
God. And I
right?
was like, wow. Like, and not that it was just like you see it in other ways when you have sort of, it was the then and now.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, if if you hadn't put them right side by side, you wouldn't have necessarily, I don't think, been really able to tell. But it was when you had them side by side, your color, like the darkness under your eyes.
Yes.
Yeah. Like your
Sunken.
hair, like just again, if it was by itself, would look great. Other picture by itself would look great. Side by side, you're like, oh, and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to, and it's just that glow. It's just that sort of alignment. It was amazing.
And it
When you
was it
did
was
that,
a
it was amazing.
small change. And then when I saw the picture, right, it
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh. And I think that was, I want to say it was about a year and a half after. So that was last day of work, which was August 1st. And
Okay.
then probably a year and a half after. And I was just about to hop on a call with a new mom, and she wanted to learn how to properly feed her baby, right? Through all the stages of the first year. And I took the selfie because, social media, like you're always trying to
Yep.
promote something. And there was no lighting, there was no nothing. And I thought, I'm kind of glowing here. And then I did the side by side and I thought, wow, I was dehydrated. I could see it in my skin, right? Like I still
Yeah.
got lines on my skin, girl.
But
But I was dehydrated. So there's a difference. There's more of a glow, right? Even the hair was more straw. The hair is softer now. Like it's just small things. And it
yeah.
all comes down to what you're fueling your body with, how you're hydrating your body, your thoughts, the amount of time that you actually stop and breathe versus just getting through the 9 to 5, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of the visions I had on that last day at my desk was
Mhm.
returning and speaking to the corporate world about health and wellness. And I'm so grateful that in the last couple of months, I've had the opportunity to speak through virtual, because obviously with everything going on, but to elementary school kids, and
Right.
then I did some high school kids, and then
Amazing.
I actually have like a seniors group at a seniors home that I'm going to be speaking to. And so I feel like that part's going to start evolving, and that vision board, like it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Like I feel it. I'm going to start doing a lot more speaking opportunities to help inspire people to know, like, you might be here, but what can you do to get yourself feeling better? And it doesn't mean like you have to quit your job. It's just a matter
No.
of having the support, right? Of what are the small little things you can do on a daily basis? Because little things accumulate to really big, great, successful results.
It was working with you that, or the way you had phrased it, if we can understand food
Mhm.
as nutrition, I mean, that sounds obvious, but if we can understand food not just as what you nourish your body with, but as preventative care, And we were having that conversation. And then once I heard that, the way that it was kind of the way it was coined, the way you had said it, I'm like, huh, like
Mhm.
just as like a preventative medicine. Like think of it as such. It doesn't have to be the most expensive things. It doesn't have to necessarily have all the labels on it necessarily, but it's about being more conscientious of what you put in your body, the thoughts, like you said, inside of your head, what you tell yourself, how you structure and frame things. It becomes sort of what you illuminate, what you glow, what you present to the world becomes very, very different. And it was when I saw that picture on your social media, it was like everything sort of consolidated, and it's like, boom, there it is.
Yeah.
Like it was incredible. Like it was such like I mean, for me, even looking on this side, I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And it just so it solidified, it just solidified the whole thing for me
That's the word.
personally on my
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, absolutely. It's solidified. You know, my husband says it today. He's just like, are you happy with your decision? And I said, absolutely. Because remember, when you're walking away from, you know, a great paying job, um, and then don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I was like making who knows what, but I mean, it was decent. And
You're
I was
comfortable.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was comfortable with it and all that. Um, But if you really put some thought into things, there's always ways to get around. There's other roads that you can go on that
Yeah.
can still, you know, and obviously like a business, you know, it takes years to get to a point, but that's okay as long as you're always improving and growing and putting in the effort. So I was working in the corporate world till midnight every single night. And
Yeah.
and I was like, if I'm doing that for the corporate world, I can do that for myself. So I will be honest and say that in the beginning, in my business, I was doing that. I was working till midnight or past midnight. And then
Sure.
I realized, no, no. Because yes, I agree that like if you're putting it into a company for someone else, you can put it into a company for yourself. But I said
True.
no, because that is going to it defeats the purpose, right? So now I'm taking away hours from my sleep. How is it? How do we do this in a smart way,
Right.
right? And
Self-care.
so and so that's what I had to figure out. I had to figure out how do I do it so that I'm in bed every night by 10, 10:30, right? So that I can remain glowing, right? So and that's where I think entrepreneurs get in a rut. That's where they get because it's like, okay, now it's my own business. I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. And it's like, no, 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 no. Yes, you need to put in the time and the effort, but
Right.
you also have to remember the self-care. That same self-care I should have and wish I would have had back in the corporate world. But I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of things that happen in those worlds sometimes that um, don't allow you to have the time for self-care, right? Because they'll
Right.
keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing and squeezing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so much, and health and self-care is really at the bottom.
Yeah. And it goes back to that expression too. You can't take care of anybody. You can't show up for anybody if you don't take care of yourself. And that's, I think, the balance that we all have to learn on some level. And then we can get into the whole motherhood thing where it always feels like, I think, sometimes the most selfish parts of us, when in fact it is not. And taking that time for yourself in order to show up for those that we obviously care about, or to give our best parts, we have to take care of ourselves.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Mel, thank you so much for doing this. And again, I love you and I love talking to you. I'll talk to you forever, even after I'm probably done hitting record, because it's what we
Yeah,
do.
we do.
So it's such always a pleasure to chat with you. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, and we'll chat soon.